Bruce DuMont back for hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. Thank you very much for joining us. Wherever you're listening from coast to coast and border to border, nice to have you with us. We've got a great panel with us this evening. They are in studio with me is Brent Hamachek. He's with Human Events, and also around the Zoom phone, we have Alexandra Eidenberg. She is with Vote Mama Illinois. She is the state chairman. Jeannie Ives is a conservative leader and a former candidate for governor and also for U.S. Congress. And Charles Lipson, a longtime professor from the University of Chicago. And we now have we got a caller on the line, been waiting for quite some time. John is listening to us in McHenry, Illinois. Go ahead, John.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, all.
Yep.
I'm calling in response to the whole January 6th commission that was filibustered last month.
Right.
I agree mostly with Ms. Ives, but what Ms. Eidenberg was saying, I just have to point out, look, we had an impeachment trial. President Trump was acquitted. If the impeachment managers wanted to bring witnesses to say, to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th and any involvement of then President Trump, they had their chance and they didn't take it. What I'm concerned about, if they go with a commission, is innocence. There were tens of thousands outside the Capitol that day peacefully protesting. We already saw the husband of an Illinois congresswoman was censured because he was there at a peaceful protest speaking, and he was cleared this week. And maybe Ms. Ives might speak to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's this could just spiral out of they're going to go after people who were peacefully there and they obeyed law enforcement. When it was time to leave, they left. And I have friends I'm sure everybody has friends who were outside and had nothing to do with the violence, just like the husband of the congresswoman. So I'll let the panel respond.
All right, we're going to go to Jeannie Ives first, and then we're going to go to Alexandra. But Jeannie, you were mentioned by the caller. Go ahead.
Yes, the caller's absolutely right. Mary Miller, brand new state rep down in central and southern Illinois. Her husband was there, and he got censored over what they thought he was part of the problem on January 6th, because, of course, Mary was there in office officially, already had started as a congresswoman, and they kind of wrapped up because the Democrats in the state of Illinois wanted to make brouhaha over it. They basically tried to censor Chris Miller. They had him investigated for being part of the insurrection. None of this was found out to be truthful. They passed a resolution last week on the House floor. It was asked that be negated and stricken from the record. And of course, the Democrats didn't do anything with it. This is the kind of problem that we have. I know people. I didn't go there, but I know many people who went there and were outside, and they had no idea at all what was happening in the Capitol. In fact, I called them and I said, "Hey, did you see what's happening on the Capitol? I'm watching it on my TV." They're like, "No, there's nothing happening here. It's completely peaceful around me." And they're on the other side of the Capitol, seeing none of this happening.
Alexandra, your response to John's position.
This was not a peaceful protest. When you peaceful protest, you don't bring guns. And I think that's just it. You don't.
No guns. No guns. That's just not true. There are no weapons. The FBI said so.
One second.
It's a lie. It's just a lie.
That's a complete lie. I cannot let her get away with that.
No, it's a lie.
There
were no guns.
Alexandra, let me just say, because I want to continue with the conversation.
Oh my God.
You made a comment. Jeannie Ives and Brent both disagree that there were no guns.
The FBI disagrees.
So let's go on to your next point. We'll put that on hold. There's certainly a disagreement on that, but tell me more about what your response was.
This attack on our Capitol is completely disgusting, and I am saddened that you, Jeannie, and Brent continue to back it up and defend it. I think that we've gotten to a point in the Republican Party where you guys are not even at a juncture where you want to support normal things like keeping our Capitol safe. And it's really disappointing and disheartening. And I don't think it was a peaceful protest. I also think that those of you who have protested, I'm going to go on a limb and assume that everyone here has been to some kind of protest. I agree with you that some people go there for a friendly protest and others do not, and things go wrong. However, with that said, this particular protest and attack on our Capitol is completely unacceptable, and defending it over and over again proves further that this is part of the voice of the Republican Party these days. And
Bruce,
one second.
Bruce, do I get a chance?
You do 1 second. Alexandra, 1 second. One second. We're gonna go. Here's where everybody's gonna respond. Okay, we're gonna go to Brent first, then Charles, and then Jeannie. Brent, go ahead.
Let me be crystal clear. Calling this an insurrection is the most abusive use of language that anyone can possibly have. There was no attempt to take over the United States government. That is simply not true.
How about shut it down?
They walked into the Capitol building and made some mischief. Nobody.
They did, but they wanted to stop a vote.
They wanted to stop a vote. It's not an insurrection.
No, but is that shutting government down?
Goodness. Sure, I guess they shut it down for a few minutes because people panicked. Okay. Look, but enough. We know, here's what we know. We know that on January 6th, one woman was shot in cold blood. We know that. We know that one person was trampled to death outside by the crowd. We know that. Beyond that, we know very little. I would encourage your viewers to go to stophate.com and watch the new 37-minute video that has been put together from a compilation of cell phone recordings from that day, time ordered. Watch what happened. By the way, we also know from some former intelligence folks that Antifa was heavily involved in what took place on January 6th. Now, we're never going to know the truth about January 6th because we're never going to get to the bottom of it. But to call it an insurrection, I have had it. It is ridiculous.
Charles Lipson, go ahead.
I have two main thoughts. The first is that I think that Alexandra was hitting a straw man and defaming, really, what Jeannie and Brent said. I don't quite agree with what Brent is saying. I think that trying to stop the vote in the Capitol was a very, very serious thing. So, but I don't think it goes as far as an insurrection. But the point is, Jeannie and Brent never defended these illegal actions. What they were doing was drawing a distinction between the people who were outside peacefully protesting and the people who went inside. And to conflate them is really a smear. I think the other thing that I want to say is that Donald Trump really damaged himself and damaged the Republican Party, not just on what he did on the 5th and 6th of January, but what he did after November the 3rd. I think that it's a real problem. And I think the fact that Trump remains the most prominent person in the Republican Party is the biggest obstacle to their winning the White House in 2024.
Okay. When we come back, I want to give Jeannie a full opportunity, but we're going to a break now. I don't want to limit her to 10 seconds. When we come back, we'll hear from Jeannie Ives on that, and then we promise we're going to move on to some other issues. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us tonight. 1-800-723-8289 if you want to chip in with your comments. 1-800-723-8289. On the Beltway continues now from WCGO in Evanston, Illinois. And before the break, we were going to turn the turn the microphone on for Jeannie Ives because she wanted to respond to the comments about the insurrection that she thinks also is perhaps a misnomer as to what happened on January 6th. Jeannie?
Yes, thanks a lot, Bruce, for letting me clear this up. Listen, I believe that the people who entered the Capitol and did so illegally were wrong and should be prosecuted. I said that from the get-go. There were thousands of people outside the Capitol with no awareness whatsoever what was going on inside the Capitol. They were there to peacefully protest, and that was what they were, able to do. That's terrific. But the idea that this is an insurrection in that they were able to delay a vote that was coming up I mean, I think I'm the only one who's ever been elected that's on this panel here tonight. And we were interrupted numerous times while I sat in my seat in the House chambers in the state of Illinois by left-wing radical protesters lining the gallery, throwing stuff over the sides at legislators, having to shut them down, could not even go out the front doors because literally you had protesters lying on the floor, having to be dragged out. Tell me that was an insurrection. No, that wasn't an insurrection either. That is a bunch of idiots acting like idiots. Okay,
Jeannie, because of the perception that January 6th has in the public, defined by Democrats, perpetuated by the national news media, and even some Republicans. My question to you is, how long will it take to erase that image that's out there? Because part of the analysis is that image has led to the severing of relations within the Republican Party, because you have people that were not there. They've taken the word insurrection. They may have agreed with it, and they don't want to support anything or anybody that might have been associated with those that showed up there, whether they were the violent. They certainly don't want to show any support for the violent ones, but they don't want to give any encouragement to the others that you say that were there in mass, but were not part of the violent part or actions of what took place there. So from a standpoint as a Republican, you are a conservative Republican, who is you either get elected or you don't, and you've had a couple of experiences where you didn't quite make it, because there's other people that call themselves Republicans who don't like the fact that you may be supporting or giving cover to those that were involved in what they describe as a riot or insurrection. So it's a convoluted question.
I've not given cover to anybody about that. I've not really discussed it. I've explained it. I wasn't there again. Listen, Republicans align behind policy. It's the Democrats that go to personality. Now, I think all of this goes away when Governor DeSantis gets in the 2024 race and we rally around a real, true leader who can show you on the fiscal side, on the cultural side, that he aligns with the majority of Americans. And then all this goes away. And it goes away when Adam Kinzinger loses and Liz Cheney loses and some of these other people lose, because we are not the cult of personality like you get in the Democrats. We are about policy. And I think that as much as people look, he was my 17th choice, President Trump, but I aligned with him on policy. I will tell you that. He had great policy when it came to the fiscal sense. Unfortunately, maybe we'll get onto it, but he should have fired Fauci from the get-go. That's turned out to be a disastrous, pick for him to keep that guy on. So, not everything went perfect, but people in my party, we look towards the policy leaders.
Could I briefly, just briefly?
Go ahead.
I love Jeannie. I actually disagree with Jeannie here when she says we're not a party and a cult of personality. Look, I'm a big fan of the Trump presidency. Was a fan of his candidacy. I loved his policies. But I think it's impossible to take a look around the country and look at the following he has and to not say that there isn't a cult of personality that's surrounded him. In fact, that's the danger for America going forward, is that people won't be able to separate continuing on with his policies and ideas from continuing on with him. So I think it's a real problem for us. I'm a Trump fan, but I do think that we become a cult of personality, and I think it's a problem. So respectfully and rarely, Jeannie, I disagree a little bit on that one.
Alexandra, as a Democrat, would you be cheering if Donald Trump ran again? Would that be viewed as easy pickings for Biden Harris or Harris and somebody else?
Yes, I think that would be very easy pickings. And I just want to take a moment, Charles, you're a very smart gentleman, and I believe we've been on the show together, and I'm a little bit offended that you would question my integrity, and I just want to point that out.
Attacked people.
I've had numerous opportunities to have bipartisan conversation with you. And Brent, that's one of the reasons why I always appreciate being in your presence. this was an insurrection. And
Was
if we
not.
want to hide and say it's not, that's the problem. And Jeannie, when you're saying that the Republican Party gathers around policy, I think we've seen that Trump is not gathering people around policy. And this is why, Bruce, to your point, if Trump is the candidate, this is going to be an easier win for the Democrats than we thought. And he encourages behavior like racism and anti-Semitism out of the communities in every single state, and it is unacceptable behavior and absolutely disgusting. And
It may be so, Alexandra. But as you think, I think I've just heard you say, it underscores that he is in a 50-state race. He's a loser. I mean, what took place on last November when Donald Trump lost? How is that going to be different than what the body politic looks like in 4 years in 2024? Does it mean that Pennsylvania is going to flip back to Trump? Does it mean that Arizona is going to flip back to Trump? Do any of those things make sense? I'm going to ask this to anybody. Does anybody think that, again, if Donald Trump is on the ticket, does Pennsylvania and I guess you could, well, I'd just say Pennsylvania and Arizona and Michigan, do any of those flip the other way?
I think it's very hard for him to win.
Go ahead.
I think
Charles.
it's very hard for him to win.
I agree.
I think that that Tom Cotton, I think, would have a good chance. I think that it's possible Nikki Haley would. I think that the best candidate right now looks like Ron DeSantis. But I think that the point that Brent makes about a cult of personality is right. And I think when you combine a cult of personality with populism, there's an element that's scary. I want to go back to something that Alexandra said. Alexandra, first, almost every time you speak, you use the term disgusting, and you use it with regard to what other people are doing. I don't think this is a helpful way to talk with each other about politics. Secondly, what I objected to in what you were saying was you were imputing to Jeannie and Brent views that they did not have. And since those views were being imputed after they had clearly said that they didn't have them, it was hard not, I didn't say this at the time, but I will say it now, it's hard not to believe that you were imputing it to them with deliberate falsity. So that's why I called it a smear. I don't think this is the right way to talk about things. Everything is disgusting to you. Every approach that the other side says is an insurrection. This kind of hyperbole is not good when Trump does it, and it's not good when you do it.
Charles, I think the insurrection is disgusting. I can use deplorable, I can use other descriptive words. Any attack on our Capitol is disappointing and disgusting.
I agree with that.
I hate that you do not like.
I agree with that. Now, what are you going to impute to me?
Are you mansplaining? Is that where we're going with this?
Oh, I see. Now we get to gender. Now we get to gender. Go ahead. Go ahead. Am I also white? I mean, what else are you going to attack me for?
All right, here's one thing, though. The idea that Trump was an anti-Semite, and you've got Biden cozying up to Iran, who is the state sponsor of terrorism with Hamas, after we've seen them fire 4,000 rockets into Israel, is a little bit concerning here. And I think that that is something that the Democrats are going to have to explain. And I've also read reports where progressive Democrats are a little bit upset with Biden.
And they have to explain why they haven't really renounced the squad.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if I could, the Republican Party has, I don't know how we got onto anti-Semitism, but we're here, so let's sit here for a minute. The Republican Party has been the party of Israel, just as a nice flag to fly in terms of taking a look at issues of anti-Semitism. They've been the party of Israel forever. Democrats get confused. They think that the Democratic Party is the party of Israel because Harry Truman was around when the nation was created. Well, I've got news for him. Harry Truman went into that kicking and screaming. And the Democrats have been kicking and screaming about Israel ever since. So if we're going to talk about anti-Semitism in politics today, and if we're going to talk about a threat to the Jewish community, we need to talk about the Democratic Party, we need to talk about Antifa, and we need to talk about the people at Black Lives Matter. That's who we have to talk about.
Okay, we do have to pause. I want to give everybody an opportunity to respond to that. And again, we are going to talk about China as well as we've got telephone callers on the line. We certainly have touched a nerve tonight. 1-800-723-8029. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us tonight.
This show's too wild.
Bruce DuMont back, and our guest this evening, Alexandra Eidenberg, is here. She is with Vote Mama Illinois. She's the state chair. Human Events, Brent Hamachek from Human Events. Do you call it a magazine or just Human Events?
You know, it's a great question in this digital world.
Yeah.
We're an online...
What's a magazine, Daddy?
We're an online magazine, news and opinion, available 7 days a week.
Okay, and people can go to Human Events and just, there you are.
Yes.
HumanEvents.com.
There we are.
Conservative leader Jeannie Ives is with us this evening, and also Charles Lipson from the University of Chicago. And let me just a program note, and then we're gonna take a couple of questions from our audience, and then we're going to spend some time on China and what retaliation, if any, we should have against China. President Trump last night in North Carolina said there should be a $10 trillion fine against them for crimes against humanity involving what came out of Wuhan. But I just want to mention that for regular listeners to this program, our fourth guest this evening is Charles Lipson. Our fourth guest would have usually been a very hard left guest. We have hard left guests on this program all the time. I've got a whole roster of hard left guests. And I will tell you, I'll be very honest, I reached out to about 15 of them to be on this evening with Alexandra. None of them were available. They all love the show, but they all had some previous engagement. And so we have in our fourth spot tonight someone who I think can be objective. That's Charles Lipson. He was kind enough to agree to do this program earlier, actually late last night, which I sincerely appreciate because he's a great raconteur and involved in great political discussion, always has been a guest on this program who is always welcome. But if you're sitting at home or you're watching us on the internet and saying, oh, Bruce is stacking the deck tonight because he doesn't know another liberal, I've explained to you exactly what this is about. It's never about a gang up on this program. It will never be about a gang up on anybody because of their political positions, regardless of what they are, whether they agree with me or not. That's not the way I conduct this program for 40 years. So again, if you've had that question, you've been thinking that way throughout the show, I have now explained it to you. And Alexandra, I hope you appreciate the efforts that I've made, and we appreciate your effort to be here to stand up and wave the flag. And by the way, there have been programs that have gone the other way where, we end up having, maybe too many liberal guests. That happens every once in a while as well. Ben in El Paso, Texas, listening to us on KTSM, joins us tonight. Go ahead, Ben. You're on Beyond the Beltway.
Good evening. For the last 4 years, our Congress has investigated the Russian hoax. We've had 2 impeachments, and now we want to investigate what happened on January 6th. Today, on Meet the Press, Mark Warner, the Democratic senator,
yes,
had the hubris to say, quote, for years we've known about attacks on our cybersecurity, but now the American people really realize that we have a problem.
Right.
What has our government, our Congress done anything to protect our safety and protect our cybersecurity? And if anything happens to our electrical grid, I feel we should hold these congressional leaders responsible for all the deaths that will occur if this happens to our nation.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I couldn't agree. I saw him on with with Chuck Todd today, and I agree with your assessment. And normally I don't agree with Chuck Todd about many things, but he was it was sort of incredulous to him that all this has been going on without a lot of detail as to who has been responsible. And I shared that concern today. And again, there was a book I want to say about 6 or 7 years ago, written by Ted Koppel, formerly of Nightline, who warned everybody about some of these issues, specifically within the electric grid. And I think you're right. That's the next time bomb that's ticking out there. And I think the point that Senator made was, this is an issue now that it's impacted the lives and the livelihood and the activity of people who needed gas in the northeastern sector of the country, and also people that like beef all over the country, and they both have been hit.
Well, hey, Bruce, let me just wait.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
He didn't say that. He had the hubris to say.
I mean, if
one
the
second.
Democrats want to live in a world without beef and only wind and solar. Oh,
just one second. Stand by, if you will, because we're going to go to Jeannie Ives, who has a comment. We had a little crosstalk there, and then
okay.
we'll go back to the caller if he's still there. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, look, if the Democrats want to, live without beef and run their lives on wind and solar, then they're going to get the perfect example if they don't figure out how to spend their infrastructure dollars strengthening the infrastructure that we have and the critical stuff of that. I ran for Congress, and when they asked me what are the top 3 things that you think we should do, number 3, right after taking on China, what are the top 3 national security concerns? Number 3 was strengthening our infrastructure, specifically our grid. But of course, my opponent was all about, we need all the green energy that we can purchase with a bunch of tax subsidies.
Right.
And I think that the Democrats are really, really hurting themselves if they don't take on this project right now and flip every infrastructure dollar to doing the hard work that needs to be done to strengthen our grid.
Alexandra, do you agree with that? Alexandra, then I'm going to go to Charles. Alexandra?
So I think that first of all, the investment in anything green, environmentally, very supportive of it. I don't think Democrats are not investing in cyber technology and cyber protection. I think, that's not what's going on. And I definitely don't support putting every single infrastructure dollar into one bucket, like Jeannie's saying. But at the end of the day, we all know that this is a threat that does need to be addressed. And I think that these conversations that are coming, what is like a week out now, maybe even a couple of days, time's moving very quickly. It's going to be very important how the conversation goes with Putin. And I'm personally very interested in seeing a rejuvenation in those international relationships and, recalibrating with allies, because this is not just a national problem, it's an international problem.
Should he be warned? Should Putin be warned? Shut this up or else. And or else, what would or else mean to you? Does anybody have an answer to that? What does it mean? If we stood up, Charles, let's go to you.
Bruce, I think that the problem that Joe Biden faces with regard to Putin is rather similar to the one that Barack Obama did, that I think that they're perceived as relatively weak, and that may be inaccurate, but it can be very dangerous. Because it leads them to challenge you. I want to say one thing. I do not think that the hardening the cyber thing really is a Republican versus Democrat thing. I think both sides now want to do it. One may have been slower to it than the other. I think it's a quite separate issue from green energy. I would say this about China and Russia. Look at the difference in what they're doing. Russia is protecting, I'm not saying that it's state actors, Russia is protecting people who are predators. And if they're protecting them, they're not doing it for free. They're sharing the money, right? Those people who are stealing money from a beef processor are giving some of it to the people who are protecting them, right? That's the way that works. China is doing something very different. They're stealing intellectual property to the order of hundreds of billions of dollars. We estimate $500 billion a year. They're not holding us up for ransom. They've got a productive economy, but they're building it on the back of stolen technology. That's very different. We want to stop both.
What about the role? I'm going to go to Jeannie because you mentioned that was one of your key campaign issues when you ran for Congress, and that is, what should we do? How strong should we be about China, and whether or not China is going to cooperate, and can we believe them if they do cooperate when it comes to who knew what about Wuhan, and whether or not the people that in the United States, like Dr. Fauci, who was supposed to be watching all this and advising the president, whether he was up to the task of really pointing out where or at least believing that there could be a malfeasance on the part of the Chinese, which he's never been willing to do.
Well, listen, this is a case where actually Trump was right in many respects. He did say that he felt like it came from the laboratory, or at least that should be investigated. We now know, because of Fauci's emails being revealed, that Fauci had a thought that was the case as well. And in fact, he was pretty certain, as well were other scientists. I mean, I think the big problem here is like, we have lost a lack of trust in the bureaucracy, in the quote unquote experts. When you tell me to follow the science, I'm not going to do it anymore blindly at all. I'm not following your mask science. You lied to us about masks, and then you double masks, and then you lied to Rand Paul about everything that you were doing, and then you lied about millions of dollars going to the Wuhan library. I feel like we can't trust anybody in the bureaucracy at this point. It has really been detrimental, the dishonesty that went on, and the media's complicity in that dishonesty. Literally, Facebook put up an article about COVID. They warning, this is with COVID. Do you still want to post it? I mean, this is it's outrageous what has happened.
We've got to pause. 1-800-723-8229. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us tonight. Bruce DuMont back on Beyond the Beltway on D-Day, June 6th. And, I know we have Memorial Day, we have Veterans Day, where we remember all of our veterans. And I think tonight may be a special night to remember all those men, and they were primarily men, on D-Day who stormed the beaches in 1944 on this date. And maybe say a little prayer for them, their families, because they not only paid the ultimate price in one of the most important battles in the history of this country, but you've also heard me say every anniversary on this date to say that if you are ever going to France, you must spend a day going to Normandy and walking that beach and observing the cemetery, the National Cemetery there. It is one of the most moving experiences of your life. Charles, go ahead.
Bruce, did you ever talk to anybody or anybody else on the panel, anybody who actually stormed the beaches that day? Because I have not.
I had a brother-in-law who is now deceased, who was involved in D-Day. He didn't want to talk about it. I don't think he was in the first wave, but again, I did speak to someone who was there. But it's an experience.
It's amazing what they
I have
did.
said I have said that every American should go to D-Day. I mean, it would be great to have that as a regular high school trip, because I think everybody should see it and understand exactly what transpired there. Let's go to Don, who's listening to us in Texas. Go ahead, Don.
Oh, yes, sir. I've got a magazine that I used to subscribe to called it was the Smithsonian.
Yes.
And they had an article in 2017 November issue, and the cover said "Pandemic Coming Soon," and it had a big, large article in it, and it showed a lot of Europeans working there, and it gave information that what prize they win for unearthing different. One of them had dug up the 1918 virus
Pandemic,
and got it out of. And it looked funny that they would have all this information long before and stating that we had to get ready. There was going to be a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think
thought
people
that
knew that there was. I think people knew that we were so connected and interdependent that things could spread very quickly. But I think people also knew that there was something I didn't know about called gain of function research. And gain of function means that you take a naturally occurring virus or pathogen and you make it both easier to spread and more lethal. And we have the tools to do that now. And you can imagine if you are the United States, you would want to have that not as an offensive weapon. You wouldn't want to use it. You would want to know what was going on so you could figure out if there were any antidotes. But the idea that we would be sending money to a lab in China with military connections where we did not have the right to go in and inspect it completely at any time, it's just ludicrous.
Okay, should now that we are learning more each day about what we knew and when we knew it, Jeannie, should the Trump administration have been more aggressive in following through in an investigatory way, at least following the rhetoric of the president? Because the president was suggesting, hey, the Wuhan, the Kung Fu China, there was such a hang up as to what word he was using, that maybe he wasn't pushing it, because he also kept saying that President Xi was one of his best friends, best buddies. Yeah. I mean, he played down the fact that China was not cooperating with this investigation. Was that a mistake?
Listen, I think there were a lot of mistakes made in that respect, and it did always bother me when Trump would praise China and then on the back end know that, they're imprisoning the Uyghurs and then with the whole COVID nonsense too. I mean, you can't play it both ways. You got to play it straight with the American people. That's what they expect. And I think he sent mixed signals. And I think now looking back, and I never trusted Fauci from the get-go. I mean, I kind of have that BS factor in me. Like I can tell about people. And I felt like I was being BS'd on the whole COVID stuff. But I think if you're going to have an investigation, it needs to be around China's roles, bioweapons. Have they violated any Geneva Convention treaties that they're signatories to? What is going on? I mean, we went into Iraq because of bioweapons, right? And now we've got this whole explosive situation with China and what they're doing. And yet we have 360,000 Chinese students getting educated at our universities. I mean, what are we doing? It makes me wonder, and I think we need to get to the bottom of this.
Bruce, Alexander, I want to ask you, this is the same question I asked sort of about Russia. How tough can we get on China? And do you agree that an aggressive investigation of what happened, maybe that's one of the most important investigations that we have? Maybe this is an investigation that's far more important than what happened on January 6th. I need a 30-second answer.
Our relationship with China is very challenging. There does need to be, pressure put on. It's hard for me to say that I've ever agreed with Trump, but I really did feel that there needed to be an investigation sooner. And he said some weird things, like it wasn't the bats, it wasn't this. He was questioning things, and I think that we should have looked into things more. I think an investigation now is not going to be as helpful as an investigation then, but I think what is very true is the pandemic is real and we need to see this recovery. I'm grateful that things are opening up, and I'm looking forward to this next phase of our lives.
We've got to say farewell to you. That was Alexandra Eidenberg. Jeannie Ives has joined us. Charles Lipson has joined us. Brent Hamachek has joined me in studio. Our thanks to Nancy Kettigan and also Kevin Lamb for the production of tonight's program, Kevin Lane. Forgive me for that. I'm Bruce DuMont. See you next week.